There is a moment in every human life when we begin to sense that our suffering has meaning, that our despair is a crucible. That moment, that alchemy of pain into purpose, is the essence of Alchemized. SenLinYu's novel is not merely a retelling. It is a resurrection of the human spirit in the aftermath of chaos. It asks us, what remains of us when everything we love, everything we were, is burned to ash? The transformation of two souls. At its heart, Alchemized tells the story of two people, once broken, once bound by the laws of the world, now bound by the gravity of each other's redemption. Their story is not one of romance alone. It is a dialogue between two wounded spirits trying to rebuild meaning in a universe that has forgotten mercy. He, a man of precision, of intellect, of guilt. She, a woman of fire, of resilience, of unrelenting compassion. Together, they represent the eternal duality, mind and soul, logic and feeling, sin and salvation. But SenLinYu does not allow them to remain static. In her world, love is not soft. It is transformative. It is alchemical. On the nature of alchemy, a metaphor of inner change. Alchemy, in the ancient sense, was never about gold. It was about purification, a mystical science of refining the impure into the divine. And in Alchemized, every conversation, every silence, every tear becomes a philosophical experiment in transmutation. Guilt becomes awareness. Desire becomes redemption. And the soul, once tarnished, becomes whole again, not because it forgets its past, but because it learns to see beauty within its scars. The inner war, between reason and redemption. The protagonist, let us call him the thinker, is trapped not by walls, but by his own intellect. He believes that logic can save him, that knowledge can justify what the heart cannot forgive. But as he stands before the woman who embodies everything irrational, everything tender, he begins to question the empire he built within himself. Is it possible, he wonders, that truth is not found in perfection, but in surrender? The feminine principle, catalyst of healing. She does not come to heal him. She comes to remind him that healing was always his to claim. Through her presence, we encounter the ancient wisdom of the feminine principle, that which nurtures, that which receives, that which accepts. She does not fight his darkness, she absorbs it, the way earth takes rain. Heavy, unending, but necessary. SenLinYu writes her not as savior, but as mirror. And through her, the man begins to see the faintest reflection of grace. The language of the soul, between silence and connection. Words in Alchemized are like spells, carefully chosen, deeply felt, sometimes withheld. The dialogue between them is an echo of something older than speech. Because in truth, the greatest transformations occur not in conversation, but in stillness. The stillness after a confession. The quiet between two heartbeats that realize they are no longer strangers. Reflection, the alchemy of pain. Every human being carries a furnace within, a place where our fears, regrets, and dreams converge. Most of us try to escape it, but the wise, or the broken, learn to step inside. Alchemized is a book about that journey. It is not a story of falling in love. It is a story of becoming worthy of love. The process is not gentle. It demands sacrifice, of pride, of control, of the illusions we use to keep ourselves safe. And yet, through that surrender, through that burning, comes the gold of the soul, luminous, enduring, and free. Every transformation begins with descent. No soul ascends without first being torn apart by the weight of its own shadow. And in Alchemized, this descent is not symbolic, it is visceral. The thinker, once so certain of his rational world, begins to unravel. He finds himself haunted not by the woman before him, but by the mirror she holds up to his soul. Her gaze strips away the armor of intellect, the cold certainties that once made him untouchable, and what he sees beneath that armor terrifies him. The boy who once longed for approval, the man who mistook control for strength, and the human being who never learned how to forgive himself. SenLinYu leads us into this interior labyrinth with tenderness and precision. Every line is an incision, cutting away the illusion that we can think our way to peace. We feel his resistance, his denial, his desperate clinging to logic as the world beneath him begins to dissolve. But that dissolution, that breaking, is the point. Because in the furnace of collapse, truth finally becomes visible. On the nature of suffering, the philosopher's crucible. To suffer consciously is to evolve. That is the alchemist's secret. Gold is not born in comfort, it is forged in fire. In one of the novel's most poignant reflections, the man recognizes that his suffering is not punishment. It is process. He begins to see pain not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a messenger carrying wisdom. SenLinYu's writing lingers here, in the quiet realization that suffering, when embraced, becomes sacred. Every tear he sheds is a purification. Every memory that resurfaces is an invitation to re-enter the wound with awareness, not avoidance. And slowly, the philosopher within him transforms into something humbler, more human. He learns that to be wise is not to know everything, but to accept that knowing means nothing if the heart remains closed. The woman, embodiment of grace and paradox. She remains constant, not as muse, but as mirror. Her strength is quiet, her compassion terrifying in its clarity. She listens without judgment, yet every word she speaks is a key that unlocks another chamber of his psyche. She, too, carries her own history, unspoken, heavy with loss. But unlike him, she has made peace with her pain. Her secret alchemy is acceptance. She does not try to fix him. She simply sees him, and in being seen, he begins to heal. Through her, the novel reminds us that love is not salvation. It is recognition, the merging of two souls who have learned to stand unmasked. It is not the erasure of pain, but the courage to face it together. Transformation from mind to being. As the story unfolds, the man experiences the gradual death of certainty. Every belief he once clung to, power, intellect, control, dissolves into a strange, luminous humility. He learns that redemption is not a grand event. It is a series of small awakenings. Moments when he chooses presence over pride. When he allows silence to speak louder than his need to be right. When he realizes that vulnerability is not weakness, it is truth unveiled. This is the alchemical process at its core. Lead, the weight of ego and guilt, melting into gold, the radiance of awareness. He becomes lighter, not because the world changes, but because he no longer resists what is. The metaphor of the furnace, fire as transformation. Throughout Alchemized, fire is both symbol and teacher. It destroys, yes, but it also illuminates. To burn is to be remade. And so, as their relationship deepens, it is not romance that consumes them, but revelation. Each encounter is another turning of the flame, another purification of what no longer serves. Together, they enter the furnace, willingly, fearfully, beautifully, and emerge as beings no longer defined by their past. Fire does not ask for permission, it asks for surrender. And in that surrender, they find liberation. Reflection, the art of becoming whole. What does it mean to be whole? Not to be flawless, nor untouched by pain, but to hold both light and darkness within and say, yes, this too is me. In the end, Alchemized becomes a meditation on consciousness itself. The characters are not merely people, they are archetypes of every human struggle. The thinker and the feeler, the sinner and the saint, the broken and the healer. SenLinYu uses them as mirrors through which we examine our own unfinished alchemy. How much of our life is spent trying to control what was always meant to change us? How much wisdom lies buried beneath the things we fear to feel? Closing reflection, the gold within. The true miracle of alchemy is not that lead becomes gold. It is that the alchemist, through devotion and surrender, becomes transformed by the process itself. By the novel's end, what remains is not two people made perfect, but two souls made real, forged by pain, softened by love, and awakened to the mystery of their own being. And we, the listeners, are left with a quiet truth, that perhaps our own lives are alchemical journeys too. Each heartbreak, each failure, each unexpected grace, part of a divine experiment refining us into something luminous, something eternal. The metamorphosis of the soul. There comes a point in every human awakening when transformation ceases to be a concept and becomes a living force. In Alchemized, that moment arrives quietly, not with thunder, but with stillness. The man who once believed he could reason through life begins to feel life instead. His heart, once armored by intellect, begins to tremble at the rawness of existence. And in that trembling, he recognizes something sacred, the miracle of simply being alive. Awakening, the shattering of the old self. Awakening does not feel like enlightenment. It feels like death. SenLinYu writes this truth with surgical honesty. The thinker does not rise gracefully from his darkness. He collapses through it. He watches the identity he has worshipped, the proud mind, the perfect control, dissolve into dust. And for a time, he mistakes that dissolution for loss. He believes he has failed. But what he fails to see, at least not yet, is that collapse is creation in disguise. When the old structure falls, it makes space for something truer, something infinite. He begins to live moment to moment, no longer seeking meaning in conclusions, but in the experience of becoming. The paradox of love, the sacred mirror. The woman remains by his side, not as possession, not as answer, but as mirror and paradox. In her, he sees both his salvation and his undoing. Her compassion terrifies him because it exposes the depth of his own longing. And yet, it is precisely that longing that becomes his teacher. He realizes that love, in its purest form, is not about merging or owning. It is about witnessing, the sacred act of seeing another being as they are, without demand, without disguise. In her presence, he understands what the mystics have whispered for centuries. That love is not an emotion. It is a state of awareness, a recognition that in seeing the divine in another, we awaken it within ourselves. Philosophy of forgiveness, the final transmutation. Forgiveness in Alchemized is not a sentimental resolution. It is the crucible's final test. The man must face not the world, but himself. The self that betrayed, that feared, that sought perfection in a world built on imperfection. He begins to understand that forgiveness is not granted to others. It is claimed by the soul when it decides to stop punishing itself for being human. SenLinYu writes forgiveness as an act of alchemy, the final turning of the furnace, the fire that burns away shame and leaves behind gold. And when that moment comes, when he finally forgives the man he once was, the world does not change around him. He changes within it. The air feels lighter, the silence fuller, the distance between him and life gone. On the nature of truth, beyond knowing. What is truth? The philosopher once believed it could be spoken. Now, he learns it can only be lived. Truth, in SenLinYu's world, is not a statement. It is a frequency, a vibration that hums beneath existence. Not to be captured, but to be felt. And so he stops searching. He begins to listen. To the way her laughter carries light through a dark room. To the way pain no longer feels like punishment, but presence. To the way life, fragile and fleeting, reveals its beauty only when we stop demanding permanence. Union, the alchemy completed. Their final union is not physical, it is metaphysical. Two energies, once fragmented, finally recognize each other in their wholeness. He no longer needs her to complete him, and because of that, he can finally love her freely. This, the balance of masculine reason and feminine grace, of thought and emotion, of will and surrender, is the true philosopher's stone. It is the merging of opposites within, the eternal marriage between the mind and the soul. He has become what the alchemists called the gold within the gold, not purified of flaws, but luminous through them. The philosopher's realization, the circle of becoming. At the novel's close, the thinker reflects not on what he has gained, but on what he has released. He has shed ambition for awareness, control for connection, perfection for presence. He realizes that every human life is an ongoing experiment, an alchemical process of remembering who we truly are beneath the noise of the world. To live, he now understands, is not to achieve, but to participate in the unfolding of one's own becoming. Epilogue, the gold within us all. Alchemized ends not with a triumph, but with a truth. That enlightenment is not a destination, but a rhythm, a quiet, continuous refining of the self through experience, love, and loss. And as we, the listeners, close this journey, we are invited to see our own reflections in this tale, to ask ourselves, what in me is still waiting to be transformed? What pain have I not yet turned to wisdom? What love have I not yet allowed to transmute me? Because somewhere within each of us, the same furnace burns, waiting patiently for the courage to begin the work. And perhaps the lesson of Alchemized is this: that we were never meant to escape the fire. We were meant to become it. Every transformation demands a return. It is not enough to awaken in isolation. One must carry the gold back into the world. And so, the man, now more spirit than scholar, steps out from the furnace of his becoming. He returns not to triumph, but to integrate, not to prove his wisdom, but to live it. The city remains the same, crowded, indifferent, loud. But he is no longer the same observer. What once appeared as chaos now shimmers with hidden order. Every face, every sound, every fleeting moment, alive with silent intelligence. This is the final initiation of alchemy. To see the divine in the ordinary. The world as laboratory, life as the final experiment. He walks among people who rush, argue, strive, and smiles, not with condescension, but compassion. He understands now that everyone is an alchemist, whether they know it or not. Each person refining themselves through trial, heartbreak, and endurance. SenLinYu reminds us through him that the world itself is a crucible. Every conversation is a reaction. Every challenge, a heat applied to the soul. And if we observe carefully, with humility, we can see our transformation occurring in real time. He begins to live without resistance. Each day a quiet ritual of awareness. Breathing with intention, listening without agenda, acting with integrity. Philosophy, he realizes, was never meant to remain on paper. It was meant to be embodied. On solitude and belonging. There is a new kind of solitude that comes with awakening. Not loneliness, but vastness. He feels the distance between himself and others, but also the connection that transcends words. The woman, whose presence was once his anchor, now becomes a quiet echo within him. A voice reminding him that love need not possess to persist. They do not part in sorrow, nor in romance. They part as two souls who have fulfilled their purpose in each other's evolution. For the highest form of love is not attachment, it is liberation. He walks alone now, but never lonely, because he has discovered what mystics call the inner companion, the self that no longer seeks validation, the consciousness that simply witnesses and allows. The integration, mind, heart, and spirit. In this new chapter of existence, thought and feeling no longer battle. The philosopher and the lover coexist in balance. He still studies. He still questions. But now, knowledge is no longer his identity. It is his instrument. He speaks less, listens more, acts less from will, more from intuition. And when he teaches, because transformation always leads to teaching, his words carry the weight of lived truth, not intellectual pride. His students sense something different in him. A stillness, a gentleness, a wisdom born not of books, but of surrender. And in those moments, the cycle of alchemy continues. The gold within him awakening the gold within others. The universe as mirror, the sacred ordinary. SenLinYu's narrative shifts, subtly, into the cosmic. The man begins to perceive life not as linear, but circular. Every beginning concealed within an ending. Every ending whispering the promise of rebirth. He observes the rain and sees purification. The dawn and sees renewal. The night and sees the infinite silence that births stars. He understands now that the universe itself is the great alchemist, forever dissolving and recreating, forever refining matter into consciousness, and consciousness into light. And in that awareness, he feels profound peace. For the first time, he does not need to know. He simply needs to be. The final lesson, the art of living lightly. The greatest wisdom, he realizes, is not depth, but lightness. Not gravity, but grace. To live lightly is to carry no residue of the past. To let every experience flow through. To be like air, unseen, essential, free. And so, when challenges come, as they always do, he no longer resists. He meets them with curiosity, even gratitude. Because now he understands that every difficulty is an invitation to remember his truth. That he is not the storm, he is the space that holds it. The closing circle, the alchemist, and the fire. In the final pages of Alchemised, he returns to the metaphor that began it all, the fire. But this time, he does not fear it. He sits beside it, eyes open, unflinching. He understands now that fire was never his enemy. It was his teacher. Through it, he learned to let go. Through it, he learned to love. Through it, he learned that creation and destruction are not opposites, but dance partners in eternity. He whispers a final truth to the flame. All that I am, I owe to what is burned away. The fire flickers, not as symbol, but as witness. The gold gleams quietly within him, and the philosopher smiles. For he has become the alchemist and the gold, the seeker and the truth, the question and the answer. Closing reflection, the listener's mirror. And as this story closes, we, the listeners, are invited to see ourselves in him. Because Alchemized is not about one man's awakening. It is about ours. It is a mirror held to the timeless journey of human transformation. From ignorance to awareness. From control to surrender. From suffering to illumination. We are all, in our own ways, philosophers and alchemists. Burning, refining, remembering. And perhaps, the next time life brings us to our own fire, we will remember his words. That what burns us, blesses us. That what breaks us, makes us whole. And that every ending is only another beginning. There is a silence that follows revelation. Not emptiness, but fullness. A stillness that hums with understanding too vast for words. This is where Alchemized leaves us. Not at the end of a story, but at the threshold of our own. The philosopher has found his peace. But the true transformation belongs not to him. It belongs to the reader, to the listener, to all who have journeyed through these flames beside him. The listener's journey, echoes of the alchemist. If you have listened closely, you may have noticed that Alchemized is not simply fiction. It is philosophy disguised as narrative. A meditation wearing the shape of story. Each scene, each silence, each confrontation was a mirror, a reflection of the parts within us still yearning to transform. The man and the woman were not merely characters. They were archetypes, two halves of the human soul, forever circling each other in the dance of creation. His mind, our intellect, our logic, our control. Her heart, our emotion, our surrender, our infinite capacity to feel. And when they met, they did not fall in love. They remembered love, the original harmony that exists when thought and feeling unite. That is the meaning of Alchemized, to become whole again. The modern mirror, alchemy in the age of distraction. In the ancient world, alchemists worked with metals and furnaces. Today, our furnace is internal. The constant tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. In an age of noise, our base metal is distraction. Our transformation begins the moment we dare to turn inward, to face the silence we've been avoiding, to feel what we've numbed, to see what we've buried. Modern alchemy is not practiced in laboratories. It happens in our daily choices. When we forgive instead of retaliate, listen instead of speak, breathe instead of react. Each act of awareness is a transmutation. Each moment of presence, a spark of gold. The fire within, the endless work. SenLinYu's brilliance lies in this revelation. That transformation is not a one-time event, but a lifetime devotion. The fire never goes out. It changes form. At times it burns bright. A crisis, a heartbreak, a loss. At times it smolders quietly. In moments of reflection, in meditation, in silence. But it is always there, asking, will you let this experience refine you? Or will you let it define you? That is the alchemist's question. And each of us must answer it anew, every single day. The gold we carry, the gift of awareness. The philosopher, now one with the rhythm of life, understands that enlightenment is not about escape. It is about embodiment. To be awakened is not to float above the world. It is to walk through it fully alive. To taste, to touch, to weep, to laugh. While remembering that behind it all, there is something eternal watching through our eyes. That watcher, consciousness itself, is the gold we've been seeking all along. It does not shimmer. It does not announce itself. It simply is. And when we live from that place, every relationship becomes sacred. Every wound becomes a teacher. And every breath becomes a prayer. A message to the listener, the philosopher speaks. Imagine now that he turns to you, the one who has listened, who has felt, who has endured. His eyes are calm, his voice steady, and he says, you are not broken. You are becoming. Every shadow within you holds a lesson. Every pain is a doorway. Do not run from your fire. Enter it. It knows your name. He smiles, because he knows that his journey is yours. That what you admired in him was always your own potential reflecting back on eternity, the infinite process of becoming. The story ends where it began, with the mystery of transformation. But this time, we see it clearly. There is no end. The soul is infinite experiment, forever dissolving, forever being remade, forever learning to love through the act of awareness. And so the final truth of Alchemized is paradoxical, yet liberating. There is nothing to attain. There is only the deepening of presence, the quiet unveiling of what was always whole beneath the illusion of imperfection. The closing benediction, the alchemist's prayer. Let us end, then, with a prayer, not to any god, but to the divine spark that lives within every conscious being. May every wound refine us. May every fall awaken us. May every fire remind us that we are light learning to know itself. And may we walk gently in this world, no longer searching for gold, because we have remembered. We are gold. Final reflection, the silence after truth. And then silence. The same silence that once frightened him, now feels like home. The same fire that once burned him, now warms him. The same world that once confused him, now invites him to dance. And as the philosopher disappears into that vast horizon of being, we are left with a simple realization that Alchemized was never a book about transformation. It was a mirror showing us the transformation already happening within ourselves. We close our eyes, and somewhere inside, a new fire begins to glow. The journey does not end here. It begins again, in you.